Hello and welcome back. This is Gina from McGuire. So a lot of times in videos, I mention how I keep even the tiniest piece of inked or stamped backgrounds that I have left over. Sometimes you kind of trim a background down and you have a little sliver, but it still is pretty because you took all that time to do the stamping or inking. Well, many people have asked how I use all of those scraps. So I thought I'd talk about that in today's video. I've done videos on using scraps in the past, and I'll link to them here. But I have more ideas to share with you in today's video. So I went through my scraps and grabbed a bunch to do these different examples for you today. Every once in a while, I like to kind of cut back my scrap collection and make a bunch of cards at once, and that's what I did here. Okay, the first idea for using your scraps creatively is to put a bunch of the pieces together and then die cut a fun shape from them. So I have a bunch of scraps here. I keep my inked scraps like this, not my cardstock solid ones, but my inked or pattern paper ones. I keep in piles of red, orange, and yellow. Then I have green and blues and purples together. And that seems to work for me. So I dug through my greens and blues and I picked these out to use. Now they're all very different and they're all from different projects left over from different techniques that I did. But that's okay. When you put them together, it always works. Sometimes if you have a wider piece, you can trim them down to smaller pieces so you can stretch it a little bit longer. I also have some bigger pieces because like this one, I actually messed up in the middle there. I got some tearing on that paper. I didn't want to pitch it, so I'll just use the parts that look okay. Onto a thin piece of white cardstock or onto copy paper would work too. I am tracing a My Favorite Things elegant rectangle die. I love this die set and use it often. Next, I'm cutting a piece of double-sided adhesive, and I'm going to lay that right on top of our pencil tracing. I'll go ahead and trim off the excess, and then when we remove the release paper, we'll be able to see our pencil line again. The next step is to take a bunch of our scraps and just cover up that entire traced area. Now I've got this bigger piece that I didn't use. This was an alcohol ink background, and I'm going to cut a bunch of strips from that. And I'll use that in with our other strips. I have a lot of strips like this that were left over from when I created a bigger background and trimmed a piece down to fit on a card or be a smaller element on a card. But I save even thin ones like this one. Now some of these were just stamped, some were alcohol ink, some have texture from glitter paste, and some are pattern paper. It really doesn't matter. You'd be surprised how different pieces of paper really work well together when you give it a clean cut look like this. So once I've covered the area, I'm going to take that same die and place it on top of all of our scraps. I'll run this through our die cut machine twice just to make sure it cuts through all of those layers. And there we have our die cut scrap shape. You could do any shape for that you want, but I like this one because it's a nice backdrop for the die cuts that I'm going to create. These are Your Next Stamp Feather Fun dies, and I'm going to use these a couple times in this video. I really like the small size and the detail of these dies. So I die cut a bunch from white cardstock, and I'm going to stack them together for a dimensional look. So I have 3 die cuts on top of each other, and you can see the detail in each of these feathers. Once I have them all stacked, so they're nice and thick, I'll glue these right onto our scrap die cut that we created earlier. Now, when you add these die cuts on top, we have textured paper underneath it, so I recommend using a strong liquid adhesive so you can be sure that they stay put. Now here's the finished card. I did white heat emboss Missing You on the bottom of our scrap die cut. I also die cut a decorative white cardstock piece there, you see the detail in that one, and added it to a white note card. I created that detailed piece with this Avery Elle Quilted frame die. Notice it cuts a window in the center, but I covered that with our die cut. So that's a great way to stretch that die for a different look. The white heat emboss Missing You is from this adorable Your Next Stamp Fabulous Feathers stamp set. So on this last card, I created a striped background of scraps and then die cut it. For this technique idea, I just die cut directly from a bunch of different scraps and then glued them onto a background to create a card. So you can see all of the feathers that I created up there. I just die cut those from little bits and pieces of leftover inked and stamped pieces that I had in my scrap drawer. It's a mix of watercolor, pattern paper, alcohol ink paper, all kinds of things. But when you die cut them from the same shape, and they all are kind of in the same color family here, you get a really beautiful look in the end. I think it'd even be fun to do kind of a rainbow down the card of different color die cuts. So after I covered the entire front of my note card with these scrap die cuts, I can go ahead and trim the excess off the edge. This comes together pretty quickly because I was able to die cut 3 feathers at a time since there are 3 dies in the set. To finish off the card, I used the Your Next Stamp Fancy Hello die that you see on the left, and also the Cool Tag banner stamp set that you see on the right. I've used that one many times, and it's been on my favorites list in the past, and I use it a few times in this video. I die cut Hello 3 times from white cardstock and glued them together for dimension. And then I also have a circle vellum that was actually a leftover piece also from a previous card, and I white heat embossed the sentiment on that. By putting the vellum circle behind our sentiment, it allows it to stand out against this bold background. You can see all the different textures on those feathers. Some are shiny, some have shimmer, all leftover scraps. So look at all your smaller dies in your collection and see if you have anything that would work for die cutting a bunch of scraps. Okay, another thing that you can do is put your scraps behind a die cut window. In this case, I created a die cut window using the Avery Elle double pierced rectangle dies, but you could do absolutely any shape that you want for this. I like that these particular dies do a piercing on the inside and outside of the cutting edge. So I die cut one from the front of a piece of white cardstock to create a window. I'm using the leftover scrap that was cut out of the middle and covering it with adhesive. This time I just use a tape runner. I'll cover that entire rectangle with different scraps that I have left over, again from the same collection. All different techniques were used to create these little thin scraps. Once I've covered that rectangle, I can go ahead and cut off the excess. I'm going to cut a little bit bigger than the rectangle itself so that this is nice behind that die cut window when we add dimension behind the window. I'll glue that scrap piece onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. And then we have our window piece. On that, I stamped Missing You from the same stamp set I showed you earlier. And I put craft foam on the back of it so it stands up nicely. To finish off the card, I went ahead and stamped and colored and cut out a few dragonflies from this Your Next Stamp set. Your Next Stamp has an amazingly large collection of stamps. All of them are happy and fun to color, and I use a lot of them in today's video, and I've used a lot in the past. I encourage you to check them out. So I added my little colored dragonflies right over our window. So the idea here is to take a bunch of your colorful scraps, piece them together, and put them behind a die cut window. It's a fun little backdrop for pretty much any images you may have. Oh, and by the way, this is an important tip. I first create my scrap background using whatever scraps I have. Then I color my images to match those scraps. It's easier to find the markers or pencils or watercolor to match your scraps than it is to find the scraps to match whatever you colored, because we want to use up what we have as far as scraps, so I start with that first. Okay, next I have the idea of creating a border using your scraps. This card features the Your Next Stamp Latte Happy Vibes stamp set. This is such a great set with these cute little cups of coffee and donuts, and I love the playful sentiments. So what I did is I created a little border of scraps. So I picked some pinks and reds and oranges, and you'd be surprised, even pieces that you don't think would go together end up going together nicely when you put them together in an organized way. And also you can do what I did, pick out your scraps, then color your image to kind of tie all those colors of scraps together. I'm covering up this long white piece of cardstock with lots of adhesive, and then I'll put my scraps along it. Now, I like to use thin scraps because I have a lot of them left over from trimming down backgrounds. However, you could cut squares, you could die cut circles, whatever you want. I'm just trying to cover them and put them up against each other nicely. It's almost like you're creating your own pattern paper. Once I've covered the piece, I'm going to trim the excess off, and I thought that would be easiest to do with my trimmer. Okay, so now I decided I wanted to have this set back behind some white cardstock, so it looks kind of like a backdrop peeking out. So I'm gluing my scrap piece here towards the bottom of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. I then have 2 pieces of white cardstock, one small for the bottom and one big for the top, that I put craft foam on the back of so that it'll have some dimension. And I'll glue those up against the top of the card and against the bottom of the card. And this will allow our border to peek out. Now I could have just glued the scrap border onto the bottom of the card and left it at that. But by setting it back, it just makes it look a little more special. It's a pretty simple card, so I wanted to add that touch. Now the skateboard on my image has a teal color, so I thought I'd pull that into the card design too. I cut 2 very thin strips of teal cardstock, and I'm gluing them above and below our scrap border. It's amazing how that little pop of teal makes a big difference on this card. Finally, I added our little stamped and cut out image, and then stamped a sentiment right above it. So really, you can create borders with any of your scraps. So I encourage you to give it a try. This one is probably the easiest of all of them, and you can use just about any stamp or die cut image with it. Okay, my next idea for using your scraps creatively is to use them with a background die. I am a big fan of using background dies, so I love finding a way to use them with my scraps. I actually had these big pieces left over. I'll link to the video where I shared how I created these. I took a bunch of sentiments from different stamp sets, put them all together, and stamped them on lots of different backgrounds. And I had these left over, and I've had them for a couple years, I think. So what I decided to do with these is cut them from the Stamp Market background. Now I have large pieces that are all the same, so it'll give like a nice continuous looking background. However, I think it'd be fun to do this with each triangle being a completely different pattern. So I die cut the background from 3 pieces of white cardstock and glued the outline together to create this frame that's on my note card. I then glued my scrap die cut pieces into each of the openings. So again, use different pieces, different scraps here on each of those triangles. Look at your background dies and see which would be fun to do this kind of inlay technique with the tiny little scraps. Onto that, I added a hello die cut, and that is from the hello die I showed you earlier, as is the sentiment from that stamp set from earlier. Here I'm adding a few clear glitter gumdrops. So your next stamp has a bunch of these gumdrops in different colors, and they're nice enamel dots that are flat and all different kinds of glitter or matte finish. I mean, they're just incredible. So I encourage you to check them out. And I used the clear glitter ones here. I also stamped a few stars here and there with some white pigment ink, but really it's a very simple card. And again, I used some pieces that I had for many years. Yes, that seems crazy that I've had these so long, but I knew they would come in handy one day. Okay, my next idea is to do a die cut inlay with your scraps. In this case, I used a bunch of different scraps, along with this fun, the Stamp Market large fall leaf die. And to my new friend, by the way, who sent me this die after seeing me say on Instagram that I wished I had bought it, big thanks to you. I have a card coming your way, so stay tuned. Okay, so what I'm doing is I am die cutting different parts of the leaves from different scraps I have. You can see I got a huge mix of scraps here. Some were inked, some were stamped, some were layered. I mean, I've got everything. And I just die cut a bunch of different pieces. I will then die cut the leaf from white cardstock and glue all of those little pieces in with a die cut inlay. So here you can see I covered the solid leaf with lots of adhesive, put the outline over it, and then there's exposed adhesive in the openings. And I'll just pop in all my little scrap pieces. Now you could do a rainbow assortment as I'm doing here. You could put it in rainbow order. You can do whatever you want. I just did it kind of randomly. Now since the focus is on that die cut, I wanted the background to be simple but something interesting. So I used this Lots of Dots background die from the Stamp Market, which is a new favorite die of mine. I love this. You'll be seeing me use this quite a bit. I die cut it from white cardstock and glued it onto a white note card. And then I have a little cording here that I tied into a bow, and I'm adding at the base of our leaf with a dot of liquid adhesive. Now finally, I finished this off with a little sentiment from that Cool Banners stamp set that I showed you earlier. Super simple card. I used up some super small scrap pieces, but it's really cool in real life because some of these pieces are shimmery, some are shiny, some have white pigment ink, so it has that matte finish. I mean, all different things together, so it adds a lot of interest to a simple card design. Okay, my last technique is a super simple one, and that is to just create a random background using some of your scraps. Now, I just did strips here, but you could do circles, you could do anything you want. This card features the Your Next Stamp Silly Fun stamp set. I just thought all these little birthday animals were fun, and so I stamped colored and cut out one of them. And then I created a scrap background. I did it off screen because it's very simple. I just cut a bunch of random scraps, glued them to a white note card, left room for a sentiment, and added our little stamped image with some foam tape. You know what's funny is the stripe piece right above where it says happy birthday to you, that was cut from a card that the Stamp Market had sent in with their packaging, like a little thank you card or thank you note, that postcard that they have in it. And I liked the color stripes, so I cut it up and I used the scraps on my cards. So you can get real creative with these techniques. I've done a design like this in the past, and I'll link to that video here in case you want to check out some more ways to use your scraps for a background. Okay, there are a bunch of ways to creatively use your scraps. And like I said, there are so many more. I encourage you to get them out, play with them. It's a great way to get new looks from your products also. If you are interested in the fun things that I used today, they are linked in my YouTube description below. I also have those other scrap videos here in the middle if you want to check them out. And I really do appreciate you stopping by today and spending this time with me. I hope you learned a thing or two, and we'll see you again soon.